Good morning, Oklahoma City, CannaCon. How are you? My name is Nathan Richter, Oklahoma's own Nature's Key. I have the privilege of running Nature's Key as the CEO. Nature's Key is a wellness cannabis company here that focuses on consistency, repeatability, and reliability in the gummies and products that we make, so that patients who are using cannabis for wellness purposes can rely on that medication. They're not going to have a different experience every time they try a product. And we're going to talk a little bit today about why. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am. Born and raised in Oklahoma. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner. I got my bachelor's degree in genetics, of all things. I've always been incredibly passionate about science and how the world works. Back then, which was about 20...
Good morning, CannaCon attendees. If you are interested in winning a full grow setup, tent, light, everything included, stop by the registration desk or HTG in booth 509. Scan the QR code. We'll be giving away a full tent today.
His voice was much louder than mine. So about 23 years ago, I graduated from college, and back then the University of Oklahoma didn't offer a formal genetics program. So I had the privilege of going through a zoology program as well as minoring, if you will, in genetics. And so what that did for me is it gave me a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about how animals work, right? About how our bodies work, about how our physiology functions, and about how we process enzymes and molecules and things within our body to make us balance and make us well. In addition to that, I was a soldier. I spent 10 years in Oklahoma's Army National Guard. I spent a year in Afghanistan fighting the war on terrorism and leading troops in that front. Many stateside missions in response to things like Hurricane Katrina and some of the devastation that we see on this side of the pond, as they say. And then I'm also a licensed attorney. I've been a lawyer for 15 years, practicing in the state of Oklahoma and other places. So I have a wide breadth, if you will, of experience and knowledge. And hopefully from this presentation, you'll learn a little bit about the healing side of cannabis if you aren't already aware. So a couple of things, because of my legal background, I need to give 2 disclaimers. One, I'm not a doctor. Everything we're going to talk about is just studies and things that we've learned, things that we know, but it's not intended to be medical advice. Nor is it construed or should be construed as medical advice. Secondly, to the extent I talk about anything legal, it's not legal advice either. I'm just here giving a presentation on information that we know. But what I am going to talk about, as you can see on slide number 1, is I'm going to talk a little bit about CBD, cannabinoids, and the healing side of cannabis. So I like to be purposeful, and I like to be intentional, and some of the things that we're going to address in this presentation are up on the slide. One, I'm going to give you just kind of an overview of the science, the molecules, the enzymes, the things that make our bodies work. We're going to talk a little bit about acute, long-term, and short-term effects of using cannabis within the body and how that works. And we're also going to talk about how you can leverage the plant later on in real-life scenarios with my special guest, about how you can leverage the plant to really enhance your wellness. So before we get started, I need you to know, when I use the word wellness, what I'm talking about are the 4 basic aspects of being a human being, right? Your physical body and it being well and performing at its optimal level. Your mentality, how you think, your cognition, your ability to process information, and how efficiently you work at processing information. So you got your body, you got your mind, you got your emotional state, which a lot of people kind of combine with a soul, right, or a personality, but actually your emotional state's separate. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then who you are, which a lot of people refer to as a soul. I call it a personality. It's the thing that makes you work. It's how you work in total. The goal of using cannabis as a medicine, right? The goal of using it for the healing power is to figure out the last one, who you are. Because you're not going to be who you are and function as efficiently and as highly as you want to when your physical body's out of whack, when your mentality or your mind is out of whack, or if your emotions are out of whack, then you are out of whack, right? So the whole idea is to balance the system out so that you can function at your optimal level, who you are and be what you are to the best of your ability. That's what this is all about. The wellness side of CBD or the wellness side of cannabis all stems on or all hinges on the idea of balance. And in the world of science, they refer to it as homeostasis. And homeostasis is described as how our physiological processes, right? How we process molecules that are in our body and how those processes balance out our other systems. So we're going to talk a lot about homeostasis. We're going to talk a lot about the importance of homeostasis. We're going to talk a lot about how cannabis is leveraged to bring balance to your body and the scientific studies behind it. So as we know, right, all organisms have to be in some kind of balance. If you don't believe me, go to the bar on a Friday night and watch. Watch when somebody walks in, watch them have a few drinks, and watch how their emotions change, watch how their physical body changes, watch how their mind changes, and then you'll know that they're out of balance. If they were in balance, they wouldn't be acting, behaving, saying, choosing some of the things that they're doing, right? So for all living creatures, a state of balance is your optimal state of being. When you're in balance and your systems and your chemistry is not out of whack, as I like to call it, then you feel really good. Your mind is clicking on all cylinders, your body's functioning at its optimal level, your emotions are in check, and you're not on big mood swings or big energy swings, right? When you have tons of energy and then all of a sudden you have no energy, you should know something is wrong because it's holding you back from being the best version of yourself, that soul that I talk about. When you think about homeostasis, I like to use the alcohol example because we've all been around alcohol, but another that's more prevalent is stress, right? So how many people here by chance know the physiology of stress? What happens in your body, right? So it doesn't matter what the stress is. It could be you're driving down the road and somebody comes across the line and scares you and you're stressed out and you react, right? That is a stress in your life. It could be you didn't meet a deadline. It could be that you're not hydrated enough, so you don't have enough energy and you're stressed out. It could be your kids. It could be a lot of different things, right? But we don't think necessarily about what happens in our bodies when that stress in our life happens. What happens is, and you all know this because you feel it, your blood pressure raises. Your heart starts to race. Your body is filled with adrenaline in some cases, right? Your cortisol level rises. So cortisol is a hormone in your body that is charged with the responsibility of carrying sugar to your cells so that they have energy, right, to fight or to flee. And that's really where the stress comes from. The stress comes from an autonomic response that we all have in our central nervous system called fight or flight. You've heard about it before, you've probably talked about it, maybe even you researched it. When we are in a fight or flight mode because of some stress, what we experience physiologically is incredible. Your body goes into a sort of a frenzy of activity to make sure that you have enough energy and you have enough resources and you have enough oomph, if you will, to do what it is that you need to do, fight or flee away from that stress. This is why you hear of people who lift cars when somebody's trapped, or in wartime situations, you hear about soldiers that are mortally wounded who drag their buddy out of a firefight. And you think to yourself, how in the world did that human being do that? It's adrenaline, it's energy, it's cortisol, it's your stress process giving you what you need to accomplish the task that's ahead of you. The reason that that's important is because what happens when it doesn't calm down? What happens in our bodies when our sympathetic nervous system is so hyperactive all the time that we don't have a chance to metabolize that cortisol and bring it down and come back to what I would call a balance or homeostasis, right? Well, we know what happens. We know that health problems occur. We know that chronic inflammation can cause things like arthritis, can lead to even more serious conditions like epilepsy, Alzheimer's, glaucoma, many other conditions that have been linked to this lack of equilibrium in our bodies. The other amazing things that, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty fascinated by the fact that my body heals itself. It's pretty remarkable that I can get a cut on my hand, and a few days later, when I was younger, a few days later, now I'm a little older and it takes a little bit longer, but my body would heal itself. That's pretty remarkable, right? When your body is in a constant state of what I'd call hyperactive nervous system, your body's fighting too many fights within for it to actually start to heal itself. This is why homeostasis is so critically important. So how does it work? Many of you have probably heard, if you're in the industry or around the industry, of the endocannabinoid system. I will tell you, as a pre-med major in college and a genetics major, I'd never ever heard of the endocannabinoid system until like 2015. Right? It's not publicized, people don't talk about it, and that's because, let's be honest, we just don't know enough about it yet. But what we do know is that the endocannabinoid system is a series of receptors that are located in your cells. So CB1, CB2 receptors are types of receptors that make up the endocannabinoid system. For your knowledge, the CB1 receptors are primarily found in your central nervous system in your brain, and your CB2 receptors are typically found, or at least most commonly found, in the tissues of your body, like your bones, your skin, things of that nature. Why? Well, scientists believe, at least right now, that CB1 receptors are addressing things like anxiety and stress, and CB2 receptors are addressing things like your immune response or your ability to overcome a disease or a cold or a cough or something of that nature. So it's a part of our physiology. It's been a part of our physiology for literally all of human existence. We, in antiquity, humans oftentimes cultivated cannabis and used it for textiles, food, clothing, things like that, livestock feed. But they also used it as a medicine. Why? Because we weren't getting enough of those cannabinoids through consuming livestock or the crop. So they'd use it as a medicine to treat more advanced illnesses in that time. Things like nausea from pregnancy, believe it or not, was a method that, or a reason that people used cannabis in the ancient times to address a medical issue. The endocannabinoid system is interesting because there's only certain types of molecules that bind to it. And those molecules include things like CBD, cannabidiol, cannabigerol, CBG, CBN, THC, THCV, all the different cannabinoids that you've heard about and have been discovered over the last really 25, 30 years bind to this system. And what they do is pretty remarkable. But I want to point out a couple of things because this slide's pretty busy. In the body, when we talk about the brain, for example, when we talk about the endocannabinoids that bind to the brain, what we're really trying to get at is what they do when they bind. And this is fascinating because the cannabis plant has been associated with a lot of effects, but we don't necessarily know how those effects arrive, right? Scientists by and large have now figured this out, and they're starting to learn more and more about physiological processes within our body that make us function at a higher level. So just to break it down a little bit between the two major cannabinoids, we have CBD and THC, right? THC, the biggest difference, as we all know, is psychoactivity. THC has a high probability of psychoactivity, causing a euphoria, even leading to things like paranoia or anxiety, whereas CBD tends to not have that psychoactive effect. It has been more associated with what I'd call the medical side of cannabis. CBD, when we talk about wellness, really what we're talking about is how CBD synergistically reacts with other chemicals that are in your body. I'll say that again. CBD chemically reacting with other chemicals or other molecules in your body, when they work together in concert, we know that CBD can balance out your system, and here's how. Studies have shown with certain cannabinoids that they'll react with things like Tylenol. So they actually enhance the effect, if you will, of a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug like Tylenol, an NSAID. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories are designed to reduce that cortisol level in your body, reduce that inflammation that's in your body, and lessen the likelihood of your body spinning into or staying out of balance, right? CBD does it on its own, but when you're using an NSAID with CBD, it actually enhances what the NSAID does as well. CBD's anti-inflammatory properties are more potent than aspirin and steroids, believe that or not. Studies have shown that CBD actually is more powerful than even a steroid. What we're learning is, or what we're really talking about is this, the entourage effect. Early on in the industry, onto entourage effect was typically used as a phrase to define how CBD and THC interacted, right? If you had a small dose of THC and you had CBD and they gave you a different experience, we said, they must be working together in a way that causes this effect, and so we're going to call that the entourage effect because they're all getting together to drive this effect. What we found now, as that we're expanding it out, is that the entourage effect actually encompasses more than just cannabinoids. Like I mentioned, Tylenol, Advil, even some steroids are affected by and can be enhanced by the presence of CBD in your system, the presence of the cannabis plant in your system. The entourage effect is defined as this biological mechanism within our system, within our body, that allows cannabis molecules of all types of the plant to bind to it and synergistically react to give an effect, right? So I want to talk a little bit about real life scenarios and how this plays out. When cannabis binds to your ECS system, what happens is that molecule starts, or that cell starts sending signals to all your other cells. And it says, hey, we need to fix a problem. The problem may be, in my scenario, is stress, right? Elevated cortisol, adrenaline, blood pressure, heart rate. We need to bring this back down because the body's gonna get out of whack. We're gonna get out of balance. We're gonna overheat. We're gonna run white hot. You guys have heard these phrases with people that you work with all the time. It's like, whoa, calm down, dude. You are white hot right now. That's because their oversympathetic nervous system is literally on fire, right? They are doing everything they can to overcome whatever stress they're feeling in their life. With trauma in particular, and this is a huge passion of mine, are veterans. Veterans' mental health is something we don't talk a lot about. Veterans' physical health is something we don't talk a lot about. We like to say things like, thank you for your service, and buy them a meal or pay for a cup of coffee, but we don't really ever sit down and try to figure out what's really going on with that soldier. I've been on the phone too many times with battle buddies, talking them off the ledge late at night because they've consumed too much alcohol. Their body's so out of whack, they're thinking about doing the thing that we don't want them to do, right? They're thinking about pulling the trigger. They're thinking about driving off the cliff. They're thinking about ending it all because they're absolutely sick and tired of reliving memories. And what we're figuring out is how this works, right? Trauma survivors, as we know, intense trauma rewires your brain. What happens when your brain gets rewired is your body has to figure out how to deal with the new neural pathway, right? And what happens is your mind gets into a mental loop where it has two different pathways to the same traumatic event, the same traumatic memory, right? So when those pathways are firing, you tend to, if you're a trauma survivor, relive the moments when they're triggered. And it works like that because your body's literally trying to find a way around the trauma. It's trying to say, whoa, we can't keep doing this. Our nervous system is too hyperactive. It's constantly on guard. It's constantly engaged. And we've got to find time to relax. We've got to find time to rest. We've got to find time to come back to a balance so that we aren't affected by, our choices aren't affected by, our physicality is not affected by, our emotions aren't affected by this constant hyperactive trauma that we're dealing with. What we found with CBD, in particular Battle Buddy, is that when the trauma rewires the brain and these experiences continue, what you see within the body physically are things like gut issues. How many people know somebody or themselves have been in a situation where you feel a lot of stress and all of a sudden I don't want to eat, or I comfort eat, right? I don't want to eat, or I'm going to eat a whole lot because it makes me feel better, right? We see it affecting our digestion. We know that it affects our mood, which means our energy levels and our emotional state, because they're two different things, but they're encompassed within the same area of the body I was telling you about with human experience, that emotional category. We know that it affects sleep, for sure. A lot of people who have suffered trauma have a really hard time sleeping. Oftentimes when we start to relax, what happens? Those memories kick in, people start reliving it, rethinking it, all because they've stopped distracting themselves from the problem. We're not addressing the problem by staying busy. We're addressing the problem through a natural medication, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in just a second. But they left, the trauma survivors, and I've talked to a lot of them and one myself, they're left feeling alone more than anything. Because as a society, good, right, wrong, or indifferent, how we treat trauma survivors when they act differently than us is bad. It's typically bad. What do we say? We say things like, get up and rub some dirt on it, right? Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Stop being such a wimp. Stop being such a wussy. Stop being this, stop being that, instead of going, wait a second, you know what? I care about you. I want to make sure you're okay. What can I do to help? And it may be just walk away, right? But it also may be, let me talk you through this and help you through it for a second, because I know in your human experience that your emotional state or your mental state are not where they should be. You are not yourself. That fourth category I was talking about, right? So at Nature's Key, we value people, so much so that our company is literally founded upon the principle that we can enhance wellness. Remember wellness, right? Physical body, mental body, emotional part, as well as who you are, your soul, right? We want to enhance all of those areas so that people function at their best level, their most optimal place. They can accomplish so much greater when they're in balance than they can when they're not. How do we know? Look at the world. You have the internet, you see crazy feats all day where you look and go, wow, that guy or that gal or that human being did something incredible. How did they do that? Well, they created something. They created life. They created something new that enhanced our lives. And they can only do that when they're actually in balance, right? Some of the most beautiful things, the most beautiful architecture, beautiful paintings, all were created when somebody was in their zone and in balance, so much so that they could allow that creative flow, if you will, to be unleashed. And we get to enjoy it, but we want to find it, especially for those who are suffering from trauma. We want them to find that same state of bliss, which is really important. We want them to find that same state of bliss so that they can also be their best self. So what do I mean by bliss? Our bodies make a natural cannabinoid called an andamide. And an andamide is an endogenous cannabinoid. They call it an endocannabinoid that's naturally made by your body. What we found in studying soldiers and other trauma survivors when they survive trauma is that their levels of an andamide are lower than those who haven't. Why? Well, we know why. Because when your hyperactive nervous system is going crazy, you release a metabolic enzyme called FAAH that's sent to destroy and metabolize an andamide. There's so much of it going on when you're hyperactive that enzyme metabolizes too much anandamide and your levels are lower. So what is an andamide and what does it do? Lo and behold, it binds to your ECS and actually levels you out. And it's named after a Sanskrit word called bliss. Ananda in Sanskrit means bliss. So when you're in your best version of yourself and you're sitting there, what do you feel? You feel contentment, you feel comfortable, you feel happy, or at least peaceful, right? You feel what this molecule brings to you, which is called bliss. And everybody wants to be at that state. Let me distinguish at least a little bit that when I say bliss, I'm not talking about euphoria, right? I'm not talking about going to the moon or being high, right? I'm talking about the total presence of your body, your mind, your emotions, and your soul coming together to be in one place and balanced. That bliss is what we're all trying to reach. And what CBD does for it is pretty remarkable. Trauma survivors have been found to have problems with neurotransmittal, right? So when your cells are working in your body, they talk to each other through neurotransmitters. But when people suffer trauma, those signals misfire. Those cells don't talk to each other. And we already know what happens when our bodies are out of balance. We know what happens when our cells aren't talking to each other. Remember those conditions I mentioned earlier? You've got Alzheimer's, you've got chronic inflammation that leads to things like stroke, cancer, heart attack, all kinds of problems that come when our bodies are out of whack. So for people that have suffered trauma and they're in this constant state of fight or flight, this hyperactive nervous system that never shuts down with elevated levels of cortisol, what are they to do? Well, I guess they could go to their doctor and get a pharmaceutical that could help, but oftentimes those only last so long. right? What we're finding with CBD is remarkable because with CBD, daily consumption of CBD actually has reduced some patients' levels of taking a medication, or they've been completely off of the medication. Why? Because the beauty of CBD as it balances the body with your endocannabinoid system is that it makes your body function more efficiently, which means you don't need as much medication. You don't need as much of this other thing to make your body work naturally like it's supposed to. That's the beauty of this plant, and frankly, the power of the plant that helps you leverage the plant for your own wellness and health. So how do we figure it out? Because that's really the head scratcher, right? Everybody walks around saying, hey, I'll smoke this or I'll consume that, but I don't necessarily know what it's gonna do. Well, that's kind of the reality of the situation we have. When you're talking about finding your dose of CBD or your dose of THC, it's really personal. Why? Because all of our endocannabinoid systems are different. And that's what I love about the world. We're all different. We all have different experiences. We all have different backgrounds and upbringings and life stories and all of those things, right, that make us who we are, that bring beauty to the world. But when we're out of balance, we're not doing ourselves any favors. We want to get back to the point where we can bring our best self to the world and make it a better place to live. How we do that? Consult with your doctor. Rule number one, if you're taking any kind of medication for any reason whatsoever, please, please, please talk to your doctor before you start consuming CBD for medicine. That's always important. The second thing is start low and slow. Remember that the goal is not getting high necessarily. The goal is getting well. And so you want to avoid the euphoria that may affect your ability to objectively look at your body, look at your mind, look at your emotions, and document what you need to write down as to how you're feeling. The third thing is document. This is the most important thing I can tell you. For many of the patients that we work with, documentation is what saves them from getting into a situation where they feel lost or hopeless again, right? Documenting everything you can think of when you consume a CBD or a THC medication is critically important for you to finding your dose. I suggest and encourage that people write down things like what time you took it, how much you took, what you took, where it came from, how you were feeling before you took it, how you were feeling during the time in which you were taking it, how you were feeling a few hours or maybe even a day afterwards, what foods you consumed when you took it, what drinks you consumed when you took it, right? All of these little details help you track and monitor your experience to figure out actually what works for you. And it also varies, by the way, with how you may work out. If you're a fitness buff, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and you're working out, how you consume, when you consume, where you consume, you can actually determine if it's enhancing or making better your workouts. These are things that my special guest is going to reference here in just a few minutes, but the last two things are also vitally important. Number one, you've got to be aware of yourself. Body scans, mental scans, emotional scans are very important for you to figure out where you are before you took, when you took, and then afterwards. And then do not give up. Don't give up. Trial and error of any type comes with good days and it comes with bad days. The bad days are not a reason to stop. The bad days are a reason to write down every reason why it was bad that day and then to come back and try to have a better day the next day. Too many people I know have taken an edible, for example, and had either no experience or had a hell of an experience. And then they're like, I don't want to use them anymore. I don't like edibles because it didn't do what I thought. Or it left me on the couch for 3 days, right? Well, that's because you took too much, right? That's because you took too much. That doesn't mean that you can't dial it back to find out what works for you. But figuring that out requires you to document, track, and monitor. On the tracking and monitoring, I just want to kind of a shameless plug here. There's many ways to do this, right? You can keep a journal, you can keep a Google Doc, you can have an Excel spreadsheet, you can keep digital notes. One thing Nature's Key has done is we're partnering with an application company called Embody 360. Embody 360 has been in the supplement space working with dietitians, nutritionists, and other providers for 15 years. And what their application does is allows you to track what you're using, how it's working for you, and then monitor that over time so that you can find your what we call therapeutic dose. You can figure it out with the application on your phone. So rather than having to go to that Google Doc or maintain that Excel spreadsheet, you have the power of your wellness at your fingertips in order to track and monitor your consumption for the reasons for which you're tracking and monitoring it. Okay, with the last little bit of time I have, I want to introduce my special guest. His name is Sam Mays. Sam is a local celebrity. Come on up. Local celebrity, if you will. Former Oklahoma State football player, former NFL football player, local podcasting celebrity. There you go, go Pokes, right? I shouldn't say that. They're going to disown me at OU. But I met Sam a few months ago, actually. Well, I've not known Sam very long, but I met Sam at a mutual meeting, talk about a little bit of business. And as I was talking to Sam, I found out that Sam is a very big man. This very big cannabis enthusiast, but not for what reasons you might think. Sam's cannabis enthusiasm comes from the fact that it made him so much better. And he'll talk a little bit about his experience with cannabis and what we're doing with Sam and his Fit to 40 campaign. So with that, Sam, if you would, introduce yourself and tell them what's going on.
Hey guys, can everybody hear me? My name is Sam Mays. I'm a former Oklahoma State All-American football player. I am 39 years old. I turned 40 April 15th. And it really started to bother me, right? It really started to kind of weigh down on me a little bit. I didn't feel as capable as I used to. I weighed 425 pounds 2 months ago, right? Before I got started with Nature's Key and using some of their cannabis products. My biggest issue is, even at 400 pounds, I'm more athletic than the average bear, right? That's just the reality of the situation. All of a sudden, playing with my kids started to get difficult. Walking around my neighborhood started to get difficult. Getting out of bed, feeling old injuries started to get difficult. And then mentally, you know, the dreading of things. Well, I've got a big day coming up, and I know I'm going to walk at least 12,000 steps, and that's going to bother me. That's going to hurt me. That's going to make me feel a certain type of way by noon, and it's going to ruin my day. When I get home, I'm exhausted. I can't move. I just want to sit on the couch and leave me alone. I'm bad with my kids. I'm bad with my fiance, the whole 9 yards. So I started using cannabis. I've never taken it illegally, right? I took it legally for the first time when it became legal here in Oklahoma, and just kind of playing around with it. There's so many ways to ingest cannabis. There's so many strains of cannabis. And for somebody who's not familiar with it at all, it can be very overwhelming and almost a little bit ridiculous at times. Like, we've all walked into a dispensary and some kid walks up to you, he's like, "Hey man, looking for that fire today?" And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I would like some regular weed, the regular weed, not the blue stuff or the red stuff. Can I have dad weed? You got dad weed section, that type of stuff. I don't really like being high. You know, there's moments where me and my buddies will get together and we'll smoke and hang out and watch a football game or a basketball game. That happens for sure, but I don't like feeling out of control. I don't like feeling chaotic. I don't like not feeling like I can protect myself. So for me, cannabis is about anti-inflammatory. It's about my mental wellness, my mental state. You know, I played on the offensive line. I had contact every single time I left the line of scrimmage. I'm very worried about CTE. I'm very worried about getting older and starting to lose dexterity in my hands and, you know, just my faculties in general. And, you know, I look at some of my teammates now and the kind of shape that they're in, and I'm panicking about it. It's like, I don't want to get there. So we met Nathan and I started taking Nature's Key products, which are phenomenal because I can trust what is on the label. If I'm taking a 1-to-1 and it says it's got 25 milligrams of THC in it, that's what's in there. My fiance tells a story about me walking around Hobby Lobby around Christmas. We all have been in a Hobby Lobby. It's a disaster on a regular day. Christmas, it's ridiculous. Look how big I am. I'm in everybody's way, right? So I'm having a rough day. I took a 50 milligram random gummy from someplace. There's no way it was 50 milligrams because about 5 minutes into Hobby Lobby, I'm dragging my leg through this place. I'm holding my hands like in a teapot thing, and she's looking at me like, "What are you doing?" And I'm panicking because I'm in public, stoned out of my mind, right? That can't happen with me. I'm a sports talk radio host. I'm a podcaster. I'm always on a microphone. I can't feel like I need my meds, but I don't know what I'm going to get in this dose. So I appreciate the consistency with Nature's Key and what that's done for me. My routine looks about 150 milligrams of CBD every day with somewhere around 75 milligrams of THC, depending on how I feel. I train 5 days a week like a real athlete. Again, I'm talking full strength and conditioning program. I'm talking field work at about 380 pounds now, and it's remarkable. Like, I blow myself away in the way that I'm able to compete. And, you know, the term homeostasis, it means so much to me because I feel like as Americans in particular, we almost don't remember what it feels like to be well. Like, when's the last time you truly felt well? You truly felt in sync with your mind, your body, and your soul. I can't remember the last time that I felt this way until recently. Probably, I would say 2 weeks ago, I hit the pinnacle, you know, consistently taking my meds and just waking up feeling like I'm ready to attack today. I go work out. My trainer is Denny Bonowitz. He was a head strength and conditioning coach at the University of Houston. He's worked at Cal. He's worked all over the country. And every single day, he's blown away by a new accomplishment. I squatted 640 pounds last week, right? I benched 340 pounds this week. I haven't been in those numbers since I was 22 years old. And it's been the fastest rise I could possibly imagine. And people think, well, you're using cannabis and now you're going to go eat everything in the planet. That's not the case if you find what works for you. And I love what you said about documentation and how important that is. This is in everything in your life. Get a notebook and just write things down. How are you feeling today? Like, this is not even with cannabis. I mean, in anything. You've got a task that you're nervous about. Why are you nervous about it? Write those things down. Documentation of life, I think, is important. Documentation with cannabis is imperative. You can't do it correctly unless you are keeping track of how you're feeling, what you're taking, when you're taking. I love what you said about the foods that you're taking with. That's important too. Some things take away from your meds a little bit. Others don't. I eat a lot of protein. I feel like protein doesn't bother me as much when it comes to my CBD and my THC. If I eat a bowl of spaghetti for lunch and then I take my meds, I don't think they're as effective. So I wake up in the morning, I take an Oklahoma Sunrise. It's a Nature's Keys product. I take 2 of those, 50 milligrams. It's like drinking 3 cups of coffee. I'm ready for my day. I take another one of those right before I work out as a pre-workout, not those nasty things you get from GNC with all the chemicals and things in them. And then at night, I take my 1-to-1 and I sleep like a baby. It's been really kind of a miracle for me. And like I said, I'm down 40 pounds almost, and I'm looking to lose another 80 pounds. I've got goals in life. You know, I want to go ride every ride at Six Flags with my kids. My fiance is an absolute smoke show. I got to get married here in a year. I can't be up there looking like this, right? So I cannot tell you how impressed I've been with Nature's Keys product. I can't tell you how impressed I've been with the education of the cannabinoid system and understanding it more and what it's doing for me personally, mentally, physically, as a dad, as a husband, as a fiance. It's been a game changer for sure. And so I will stand up here as a witness and tell you that cannabis is a miracle drug. It really is, and it's something that can impact everybody in a positive way.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you, Sam. Just gonna set that right there. So, Sam's journey's been pretty remarkable in just a few short months. Like he said, not only, I mean, the milligram dosages that he's taken may sound very high, right? But in reality, for his metabolism, they work perfectly. He's not too much, where he's locked into the couch for 3 days, but he's not too little that he's not feeling the relief, recovering faster from his workouts, being a better fiance, dad, brother, whatever, right? Whatever hat he happens to be wearing that day. For physical fitness, you can see just how impactful cannabis can be. From a mental aspect, I'm going to tell you a story for me as to how it can change your mindset. For me, I struggle with PTS. I didn't want to admit it for the longest time because, by God, in the military, if you mentioned PTS, they kicked you out. That was just the nature of the military back then. They're coming around. But for a long time, a lot of soldiers just hide it. They don't want to discuss it. And what happens in our bodies when we're constantly in this state of stress and now we don't feel like we have an outlet is that our behaviors start to change. And for me, it was anger. I would lash out with anger, and I didn't understand why. I couldn't figure it out. I'm not an angry person. In fact, I'm quite a happy person most of the time. the smallest little stressor, and I'd snap. I would fly off the handle. And I got to the point where I realized that I was not being a good brother, husband, father, son. I wasn't being a good anybody. I wasn't even being good to myself. I was so angry all the time. My brother recognized this and said, hey, my brother, by the way, is a genetic counselor for Vanderbilt. And he said, hey, listen, you need to try cannabis. Why? Because our genetics control our cells, and our cells control our tissues, and our tissues control our function, and our cells control our mind and how we think and how we process and our emotional state and all of these things. And you need to try it because it'll help you. And lo and behold, I hate to admit it, he was right. Because I started taking CBD and I started taking THC at night, and all of a sudden I started sleeping through the night. I wasn't waking up seeing some of the images that I've seen. I wasn't waking up with night terrors. I wasn't constantly flipping and flopping in my bed because there's something's gonna come through the door, right? I was actually able to release those memories and go to sleep. In addition to that, what I found on the CBD side is that my body, when I started to get rest, started to balance faster. The more I rested, the more I relaxed, the more I could let my mind relax, the more physically fit I became. I wasn't carrying the stress, as we like to say it, right? I could release it. So my body started functioning better. With that, my emotions kind of came into balance. I was no longer up on a high, happy 1 second and then depressed the next. I wasn't overly anxious about what's to come, but I wasn't depressed about what's happened. I was simply able to be present in the moment. And what it did for me on the family side, on the professional side, on really every front, was it made me a better human being. The trauma that rewired my brain was something I was never going to overcome without cannabis. So this plant has some absolutely remarkable properties to it. And I'm fascinated by them, and I want to study them more because I know that that's a way that we can all live a better life and balance out this chemistry experiment that we walk around with every single day. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or concludes my presentation. And I appreciate everybody coming. Shameless plug again. If you want to find out more information about things like tracking, monitoring your dose, tracking your experiences, more information about Battle Buddy and how it works. It's a doctor formulated formula, so we'd love to talk to you more about it. If you're interested in hearing any of that and we want to get offline, our booth is 703 Nature's Key. We're in booth 703. Please stop by. I would love to talk to you. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your stories and share some of mine with you, and we can talk more about how cannabis can change the world. It's Embody 360. It actually ties, so the app ties into your, is designed to tie into your smart device, like your watch or your Fitbit. And so when you're sleeping, the app will monitor your sleep. When you're working out, it tie into your health data and pull your fitness performance metrics. And then you can also input data into it about what you've consumed, why you've consumed it, what experience it's doing for you, and you can track it that way. Yeah, it's got, like every application, it's got some kinks, but yeah, it works well. And it works, what I love about it is it works under a protocol. So you'll take a survey, that survey will be a series of questions that you'll answer. Based on your answers to that questions, there's a product recommendation, hey, maybe you need to try this with this. And then from there, you have a baseline standard that you can actually measure against. That's the beauty of the app.
All right, I had a question. First of all, go Pokes. And that's coming from a Longhorn. The question was, I guess it's more of a statement. The local market, by local I mean in Oklahoma, they're really, dispensaries are really looking to have products, flowers come in with a really high THC number. And the whole talk about, you got to find the right levels for you. What we have found with some of the products we're producing is sometimes that THC number can be lower, but the terpenes are higher, and you get that better balance, and you get a more level. So what's the steps that you guys are taking to educate the market as well? Because it sounds like you're doing a good job of more of a CBD level type of product versus a high THC number.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. We've undertaken a program voluntarily that we call bud tender certification. So we know that bud tender education, we know that the bud tender is the frontline interface with the patient. We know that when that person comes in, and like Sam mentioned, they don't know. The bud tender says something like, "You want that fire?" And he's like, "What does that mean?" Right? So we know that if we educate them on the beneficial healing properties of CBD and cannabis, and we put information in front of them about how edibles are processed, or how vapes products are processed, or how concentrates are metabolized in your body, then they'll have more knowledge to educate the patients. So we've started with Bud Tender University for all bud tenders in the state. If they're interested, they contact us, we set it up, it's free. Our people come out and put them through an education curriculum on how cannabis works. We are soon to launch a program that's directed directly at the patient. Right now, as a processor, we can't sell to patients, so there's limited interface there. But with conferences like this and other opportunities for us to actually get in front of patients, we're starting to launch that program as well to educate patients on how it's metabolized, how it works in their bodies, so that when they walk into that dispensary, it's not so overwhelming. They don't have to go, "Wait, what is that? I don't even know what's Gorilla Glue. Why would I put that in my body?" They just don't know. And I think it's critically important, especially considering like some of the legislation that's pending here in the state for recreational products. If we open up a recreational market to a lot of people who have no idea what's going on, we're going to see a lot of fallout. And we don't, those people could benefit just as well from cannabis from those who know about it. I mean, if anything, those who don't know about it are going to benefit a whole lot more than those who do. So it's incumbent, and we take pride, but it's incumbent upon us to educate, because there's just a lack of knowledge. Yeah. Yeah, the high milligram market that we're in right now kind of is a difficult thing to navigate when you're trying to educate people on the beneficial properties of like CBD. Because CBD is kind of I don't want to say a bad word, but it's gotten a bad word now. Well, it's not high milligram THC. It's not going to get me the most high. Well, it's not designed to. It gets you the most well. So if I understood your question, thanks. Are we working with other cannabinoids to see how they affected by? Yeah, THCA. I've not found that. So her question was, if we're working with THCA, for example, and we combine that with CBD or THC, are we finding it to have a more of an entourage effect, more of an impact, more of an experience? I've not found that, and mostly because we haven't really looked at it. But I'll tell you what we have found is when you use THCA, for example, you combine that with CBD, CBG, or THC, you have more THC. Because the THCA most often in your body is converting over to THC, either 11-hydroxy or some other derivative, and it's not staying. Yes, if you're ingesting it, but your body will metabolize it through, like your liver will convert it, and that's. There's so many unknowns with how that works right now. That's super cutting edge, frankly. A lot of people our scientists don't yet understand how CBG, which is the mother cannabinoid, and THCA, how they're converting, but we're seeing it. So people are like, how does that work? Because it's not traditionally how we know THC works or CBD works in the body. So I haven't seen a lot of it, but it's because it's so new, nobody's really studying it, to my knowledge, yeah. Anybody? Yeah, yes, sir. Correct. That's correct. Yep. All of our CBD is hemp derived. Yep. My man Flo. My guy Flo here is from the Virgin Islands. I can introduce Flo and tell you that Flo's doing remarkable things down in the islands, and he knows very well the idea of homeostasis and how it's impacting patients' lives in the Virgin Islands. If you guys want to talk to somebody from a beach that's not cold outside, that has great experiences, but also can tell you some pretty amazing tales about how people's lives have been changed for the better using cannabis products, my man Flo over there is a wealth of knowledge. Thanks for being here, by the way. Yes, ma'am. I love RSO. Yeah, so yeah, very little is known about the physiological processes of RSO, but it functions the same way. That molecule is going to bind to the same receptors, or one of the two receptors within the endocannabinoid system. The effect of it is what we're learning. So when RSO binds, we know physiologically it's sending signals to try and balance out the body or make the body find homeostasis, but it has an interesting property because it fights cancer. And we've seen it really fight cancer, like really well. And we wonder, like, how does that work? Why is this particular molecule having such an impact on the cancer when others don't? That I don't think we know yet. Yeah, yep, it's available here. You can find it in dispensaries. You want a battle buddy? No, she said RSO. RSO. Yeah. We use full spectrum hemp. So yeah, it does have minute amounts or trace amounts of THC in it because it's full plant. But yeah, we use hemp because it's the entourage effect for low doses of THC we found to be more impactful and more beneficial than a higher milligram of Delta 9. So we have products that have lots of Delta 9 in them, don't get me wrong, but we know that when somebody's looking at CBD as a wellness aspect, there's a benefit to having THC in it, at least a small amount. There's more of a benefit when you've got full plant, right? When you're using all of it, as opposed to just trying to isolate one molecule out of it. So yeah, we actually use both in different products, but we're big believers in full plant, full spectrum.
So we're vertically integrated.
Yeah.
We grow probably 20, 30 strains, 4 different dispensaries, and most of our flower that sells is all high THC, like someone was saying.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it is. I mean, I wish it wasn't, but
No, it is.
I mean, they want 25%, they don't want the 1-to-1. We do a lot for terps, obviously. We try to get our terps as much as we can. You touched on terps. How much are terps important in your model? Because I know CBN, they all work together. We don't know how. But how important are those terps, and how we better educate the patients on it?
So I intentionally did not touch on terpenes because I could spend another 2 hours talking about terpenes. Terpenes they're massively important. They've been important for a long time. Now, cannabis-derived terpenes haven't been in a lot of substances or a lot of foods for any amount of time, but other terpenes have, and we know that they have a beneficial effect. What we don't know is why or how they're synergistically reacting with CBD or the molecules in the cannabis plant to give that effect. It's a little bit of a mystery. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have a product that actually Sam uses called Jumpstart, and it's 25 milligram base of THC Delta 9, but it's got limonene in it. And we know limonene is also as an anti-anxiety, but it's also kind of a pick-me-up. It's like having a cup, maybe 5 cups of coffee. So what Sam has found with using Jumpstart is in the morning before his workouts, you always sort of have that anticipatory anxiety before you work out. It's like, I don't want to do it, but I know I need to, right? When you take Jumpstart, that anxiety is less, right? And you get the 5 cups of caffeine, so to speak. You get the pick-me-up, and you have a wonderfully powerful, energetic workout that maximizes the fitness of your body because you were able to overcome it mentally. That's one way we know that limonene, a terpene, interacts and synergistically works with THC. We don't necessarily know how, but we know what the effect is. Why? Because we've talked to lots of people, including Sam, as to how they feel after they consume it. So I could spend forever talking about terps. They're so important. They're incredibly valuable to the healing side of CBD and the beneficial side of CBD. There's just not a lot known about them. Yes. Yeah, cannabis-based terpenes. One thing I might say about the Oklahoma market, because now 2 people have mentioned it, it is a myth that more THC causes you to get more high. There's only so many receptors physiologically in your body to which cannabis can bind that give you that euphoria. You can pile on as much as you want, but you only have so many, so you're only going to get so high, so to speak, right? Unfortunately, people are unaware or haven't experienced the fact that when you have like a 14% CBD, 3% terps, and a 10% THC, that you're probably going to have more of a high or an experience than you would just taking 21% THC. And that's the entourage effect. That's the beauty of those molecules working together to give you a better experience, whether that be get more high or whether or not, but a better experience than it would be with just straight Delta 9. The other thing I would caution people on, especially in the market, and I talk to them about it, is high Delta 9 content, we still don't know what that does to the body. We know that there's not really been adverse effects, but we haven't studied Delta 9 long enough to know how it's going to affect your liver long term or how it's going to affect your kidneys long term. So high milligram Delta 9 could potentially be bad for people, but we don't know yet, right? So I try to caution people, look, I know you want to get really high, so to speak, but that 27% or 22% THC flower out there, you might want to look for something with maybe terps in it or maybe CBD, because you really never know how that's going to affect your kidneys long term or your liver long term or other processes long term. So just my 2 cents on the Oklahoma market. It's not a bad thing. I'm not opposed to people that recreationally want to use. I don't care. But when we're focused on the wellness side, I try to largely avoid the get high conversation, because that's not why we're here, right? We're here to get well.